Welcome to our broadcast. Wendy Wasserstein's long-awaited play, The Sisters Rosenzweig, has opened at Lincoln Center and will soon move to Broadway. For the stars, Jane Alexander, Robert Klein, Madeline Kahn, and Christine Estabrook join us. But first, we begin with one of America's finest independent filmmakers, John Sayles' first feature, The Return of the Secaucus Seven, won him the Best Screenplay Award from the LA Film Critics, as well as national acclaim. He's also an award-winning fiction writer. His latest film is Passion Fish, and we're pleased to have him here. Welcome. Good to see you again. Tell me about Passion Fish, because Mary was here. She plays, what's the May Alice. You have thought about this idea. Oh, set it up for me. What's the basic idea?
Yeah, it's about a woman who's become a soap opera star in New York. She's hit by a taxi after getting her legs waxed on the Upper West Side, gets a spinal cord injury and is in a wheelchair, paralyzed. She goes back to her childhood home, which she swore she would never go back to except in a pine box, and in southwestern Louisiana, and basically has decided to drink herself to death and crawl in a hole and die, and goes through a series of caretakers from hell, and finally gets a woman played by Alfre Woodard who won't quit. And it's about the way that they kind of...
The bond that takes place and how they sort of are interdependent, dependent on each other.
And almost accidentally force each other back into life.
Yeah. And in fact, I don't know, I don't want to give too much of the film away, but she has a chance to leave and doesn't because of some relationship there. What I referred to was a notion, this idea has been sort of percolating there for you for a long time, since you worked in a hospital?
Yeah, I worked in hospitals and nursing homes probably 15, 20 years ago as an orderly. And I was always fascinated by this relationship between caretakers and patients. It's a funny relationship. You spend as much time together as married people, maybe more. You may have nothing in common. And it's also a power relationship in that one person has power because they're physically able, and the other one gets to sign the checks.
Right.
And whenever you have a power relationship like that, where one person's on top for a couple hours and then the other may be on top, the two have to watch each other a little more carefully.
Yeah. And then you yourself, had a back injury or something?
Yeah, I have degenerative discs.
And you went into the hospital and you got more insight about...
I was getting therapy at the hospital for special surgery here in New York. And I was at this kind of parking lot for people waiting for their x-rays, and started, every time I'd be there, seeing other people being pushed by a caretaker around in their chairs, and people were kind of cranky with each other because they were waiting for a long time. And it just kind of refreshed it in my mind that that's right, I wanted to do something with that.
Some are saying it's a different film for you. Some even said, I don't know what this means. It is a film for people who don't like John Sayles films, whatever that means. You read that probably. Is it a takeoff for you? Is it a different film for you?
No, I'd say that in the movies, I've done 8 movies now, and a couple of them are more personal rather than social. Yeah. So this is a movie that's less of an ensemble piece than something like City of Hope or 8 Men Out. Right. It's more about 2 people. There are people who visit and who tell you about their lives in their community, but it's mostly about their personal decisions.
Yeah, but in a sense, you could also argue or make the point that at 8 Men Out, about the Black Sox scandal, made one about unions and about a certain town and a certain place, and even Secaucus 7 as an ensemble kind of thing here. This is a play in which really there's no political idea as much as it is a personal.
Yeah, I think there are social things in it, but it finally comes back to, I think, something everybody can relate to, which is at some point in your life you realize this just isn't going to happen for me. Yeah. These are women who are turning 40. They're at a point in their lives when, if a certain thing hasn't happened for you, it may be a family, it may be a career. There are some limits, and what do you do when you hit that limit and you're not?
How do you
going
come
to
to grips with it?
Right. If you're 40 years old and you're not a starting forward for the Knicks, it's not
going to happen.
Right?
If you're 30, and
I've learned to live with that. Right.
Was that what dreams did you have for yourself that you now realize are not going to happen?
Sports ones when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a center fielder for the Pittsburgh Pirates.
And when did you realize that this is unlikely to happen?
It was about high school when I realized that I was actually fairly good, but I wasn't that much better than even these high school guys, and the competition just kept getting better every year.
Yeah, you weren't hitting 400.
Right, right. I was hitting,
And
for no power.
Was it a letdown for you? Did you?
It was just kind of reality testing.
Yeah.
And I think the further you go down the path, the tougher it is. I know people who really could have played Major League Ball, but they tore their knee up. That's a tougher one, or they had that tough decision.
But then there are also these people who, and the Pete Rose may be an example, although I don't want to overemphasize it, of limited, and he gets angry at you if you make this point, that he became the athlete he was because he was hustle and because he gave more than everybody else, because he wants to believe he had as much talent. And if you get as many hits as he did, I think you could make the point. Nevertheless, there are people who achieve superstardom mainly because they work harder than others, not as much talent.
Right.
And you wonder,
they're obsessive about it.
They're obsessive about it. And you wonder about those people, whether they could have, that there were other people who dropped out, but who could have made it simply because they gave up too soon.
Or didn't believe in themselves or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting to see what people do next when they hit that wall, how they find a way around it, whatever it is. And some people don't. Some people do get bitter. Some people do give up. But then there are those other people who find some way around it and back into life.
And what is it they do? Give me some sense of how people come to grips with that. Because this is a central theme of life, is how do you come to grips with your expectations for your life?
Well, there's a central metaphor in Passion Fish. She is an actress, and she has these actresses who visit her. And one of them tells a long, detailed story about the fact that she only had this one part in a movie, and it was in this really stupid science fiction movie, and she only had one line in it, and it was really stupid and embarrassing to say. That's the life of most actors that I know. You come out of college, you've been doing Lear, you've been doing Arthur Miller, you've been doing all these kind of classic parts, and then within 2 years of waiting tables, you're happy to get an Alpo commercial.
Right. So
you're thrilled when you get on Love Boat, and you're telling all your friends who used to scoff at the people who worked in Love Boat, well, my agent says it's a good job, and you're lucky because you even have an agent. Well, that metaphor is for what happens to most people, which is you didn't get to play Lear finally. But this woman, this actress that Nancy Mehdi plays, is still a professional. She does her best job with that stupid line in that stupid part. May Alice didn't want to be a soap opera actress. She had her sights set on something else, but she ended up being a very good soap actress. So what I think people do is they make the best of it could be somebody who has a child who's physically handicapped. They had dreams that their kid was going to be an All-American for Purdue. The people who really beat that say, that's not who I had for a son, but this is my son and I love him, and we're going to make something of this.
And I'm going to find the best and the joy that there is in this.
Exactly.
And that relationship will give me a new definition of what can happen. Your life would seem to be, though, an evolving life in which you have met no ceiling. Forget the Pittsburgh Pirates for a second, but think about somebody who's a writer. I mean, you were up for awards early on as a writer, the O. Henry and other things. I mean, you may have even had a National Book nomination early on. And then you got the Genius Award from MacArthur for filmmaking and other talents they saw. Do you see any ceiling at all? I mean, when you look at what you...
Yeah, I think what it is with me is that it's whether you define your own success or whether you let other people define your success. So every time out, people like your movie or don't like your movie. The movie either makes a lot of money or doesn't make a lot of money. If you define your success by those parameters, there's always a ceiling. If you define your own success, which for me is just getting to make these things, it's such a triumph for us to even finish a movie, get it financed, that becomes
because you don't go the
success.
studio route, you pretty much finance them
Usually
yourself.
we don't, and for just the existence of these movies is a success.
So there is success in being able to make a film for you, in which you
or
make it by
finish
your
a
own
short story,
by your own your own rules and by your own definition.
And so I've been very lucky in that way, in that somehow I've been able to make my own definitions of what success is. And so I've never had that much pressure on me, except for the pressure that I put on myself.
And the definition of success for you is being able to make the film that, how close you come to making the film you wanted to make?
Yeah, very often we get into, with a distributor or whoever, one of these things where they do a demographic test and they say, well, if you change this, this, and this, 8% more people would like it and we'll make more money. And I say, I'm not going to disagree with you on that. but it's not the story I want to tell.
It sounds like me too. Yeah, I mean, that's the whole sense.
And once that's finally something they can't argue with. You know, I'm not going to argue with their demographic research, but they can't argue with that isn't the story you want to tell.
Well, there was one time you went out to Hollywood to make, what was it, One Baby? What was
Baby,
it?
It's You.
Baby, It's You. And you basically, they said, look, you got to do this or else we're not going to go through with the film or something to that effect. And you said, unless you do it this way, then I'm going to take my name off it and take this film and do whatever you want to, shove it wherever you want to.
Yeah, well, it wasn't a nice situation. It really was the old famous creative differences.
This was gridlock creative difference.
And finally it ended up being the movie I wanted it to be, and they didn't kind of kill themselves releasing it. We were just talking about how few people got to see it. But what that taught me was to stay out of those kind of situations. To really go in with everybody's eyes open, both the financiers and my eyes.
Okay, so here comes Musta Studio executive, and he said, Sayles, I love Passion Fish. You do character, you do dialogue. This is what some of them are saying. There was subtlety here. I saw skills I hadn't seen before with your stuff. And here is $30 million to make a film. However, you don't get final cut. Do you say, no, I don't want to make that film?
Yeah. I mean, I already have made more money than I thought I'd ever make in my life. You know, I went pretty much right from making minimum wage. I had a short, wonderful period when I was in the Meatpackers Union, and I was making $4.40 an hour, to making this ridiculous money. And I'm a very low-paid screenwriter on the scale of things, but it's still a lot of money. So I make my living as a screenwriter. I don't necessarily make that much money as a director. And so the $30 million, really what the person who has $30 million to make a movie usually has about 12 to make.
Okay, but think about Spike Lee for a second. I mean, look, is there any corollary between what he's done, because he now uses the studios and takes their money
and uses them very well.
Very well, he does.
Yeah, I think Spike's movies have actually been financially more successful than mine, and as long as they stay that way, he's going to be able to do what he wants to do and use their money. You know, he has his fights with them, but generally he wins them. Overwhelmingly, he wins them.
That's right. I mean, he knows
there's
how to
a handful of people whose movies are doing well enough that they can win those battles. Our movies haven't made that much money. And that leverage, if you don't go in there with that leverage, you're walking into the wrong room.
Have they all made money because you produce them so
No, actually...
or have any of them made money?
Yeah, actually about half of them have made money.
Secaucus cost you $60 to make, and you made $2 million.
However, the amount of money that they made, even if you make $2 million on a film, that's not even on the radar. For a major studio are now spending $8 to $15 million just to advertise a movie. They have single actors who are making 6 or 7.
Well, 15 or 20 when you get to...
So it's kind of like opening your own little restaurant on the corner and then going to McDonald's and saying, I should run your franchise.
Yes. Have you seen a film in the last year or 2 years in which you said that was successful commercially, in which you said, there's a film I would like to have made or could have made or would have wanted to have made?
That rarely happens with me. I go to the movies not to see what I should be doing, but to see what other people's heads are into.
And do you learn from them?
Yeah, I'd say that's where I learn the most, is watching other people's work, and it's only the second time I see it. Because a good movie, I stop noticing the technical things. If it's really working with me, I'd watch the movie and have a great time. It's when the movie isn't so good or isn't working with me that all of a sudden I start seeing the angles and I start seeing the typing on the paper. And sometimes I can even hear the voices at the story conference where they say, oh no, if we do this, we're going to lose some viewers, so we're going to do that. And you see the compromises built into them. But a good movie, I'll just go with the flow, and then I'll say, geez, I should go back and see that again to see how they did that.
Yeah. Do you, you always write your own?
Yeah.
You know, you have never directed a film?
Only the Bruce Springsteen videos, you know, which are stories. You know, those are song stories, and that was interesting to work on somebody else's story. But the features have been all my own scripts. Do
you think of yourself more, I assume you do, more as a writer than you do as a director?
I actually think of myself as a storyteller. And when I make a movie, the screenplay is a first draft, the directing is a second draft, and the editing is a third draft. And I would no longer give up control of any one of those 3 stages, as I would write 2 drafts of a novel and hand it over to somebody and say, you finish it, and, you know, do some marketing.
But what
tests.
happens when an actor comes up to you and says, "Listen, Mr. Director, you don't understand what the screenwriter meant,"
Well,
or I do have an alternative interpretation of what I think the screenwriter meant.
Well, usually because I am the screenwriter, I have an advantage.
Right.
But I usually listen.
That's my point.
And
would you change?
I have changed in every movie. I've changed 1 or 2 lines.
One or two.
Yeah, and it's usually actually not something of meaning. It may just be hard to say. You know, it may just be a tongue twister. If I rephrase it, it's easier to say. But every once in a while, for instance, in Passion Fish, there was a scene where Alfre Woodard's character is in the kitchen with a character played by Angela Bassett, and they're 2 black women, and they've kind of crossed. One started in the projects and is now very successful. The other started upper middle class and is now working almost as a servant. And there's a line where Alfre was supposed to say, when she hears the other one was from the projects, "Oh, that's a long way up." And she felt like that was a little bit of a dig.
Yeah.
And so we changed it to, "It's a long way out." And basically she came, "Do you want me to dig here?" I think, you know, as a black woman, having been in a lot of these conversations from people from different backgrounds, that's a dig. Is that what you want? So it wasn't change the line, it was, tell me what this is about.
She said, "Do you want me to dig," meaning do you want me to go inside my own experience?
No, do you want me to dig at her?
Oh, I got
Is
you.
this an insult or a little bit of a veiled insult? And I said, not at all. And then she says, well, maybe we should think about the line. And then I could change it. When I write, I've written parts for Hispanic characters, and I always ask them to Puerto Ricanize the Spanish, or, because I can write in Spanish, but very, very simple textbook Spanish, and I'll ask them to give it some flavor of whoever their character is. So I do rely on the actors to a certain point. The actor who I've let ad-lib the most was Joe Morton in Brother from Another Planet, but he didn't have any lines.
Reading poetry, and he was wonderful.
But I really relied on him. He really was a partner in that movie in an important way.
This is a film in which you are writing dialogue and character of 2 women. Is it different? Is it hard? I mean, people might ask, how does John Sayles put himself into the head and soul of women going through an important crisis?
Yeah, I think as with any character you write, the most important thing is to shut up and listen. That's the first step of any writing.
Listen to what?
Listening to people talking. Watch them, watch how they react to each other. Certainly if you haven't been around the people you're writing about, it's more difficult to do. Yeah. Over half the people in the world are women. It's not like you can't find one when you need one. Yeah. So I really have never felt like that's a big deal. I don't think women are any kind of mysterious.
And would you go to what they call your significant, whatever the expression is, and say, does this ring true to you?
Actually, it's more like all the women who work on the crew. I've had a lot of women as producers, this and that and the other. Because you're inside that world that's not an only male world, you feel things. You don't necessarily you have a meeting and say, so what do you think of this? It's more like you just listening to them, and you just get a sense of what would a person do in this situation. I think finally, though, all the things that I've written is more about not what's exotic about people of any different kind of race, sex, class, age, but what's in common with them, what emotions that we share. And if you start with that, and you start thinking about, well, I'm thinking about emotions here, and just because this person's from Uruguay, that doesn't mean that they think in a totally, totally different way.
And this could have been a play about this could have been a film about 2 men and would have had all the same dynamics?
The dynamics change slightly. I think people reveal things in different ways depending on their age, their class. Everything in this movie affects it. Race affects it. The fact that both the women are upper middle class, spoiled only children, affects who they are. But sex is only one of the many things between them.
Why did you choose Louisiana?
Well,
they go back to Louisiana, the Bayou country, and you've got Cajuns and food, and you can smell the place. And
it's first of all, it's very photogenic, which never hurts. I wanted Mary McDonnell's character to be from a place that definitely wasn't New York City. She's gotten to be kind of a hard, abrasive, defensive New Yorker just to survive, for good reason. But I wanted her to go back to a place where that kind of behavior all of a sudden sticks out and is inappropriate. I also wanted it to be a place that has, as much as it's come into the 20th century in every other ways, has retained a unique culture. And Southwest Louisiana, which is Acadiana, definitely has retained that. You still hear French on the commercials and on the jukebox. The food has its own feeling, the music has its own feeling, and there's also an interpersonal feeling there that's very different than big city life, especially. I'd say that it is more personal. If May Ellis wanted to lock herself up in her apartment in the Upper East Side and drink herself to death, she could do a pretty good job of it. In Louisiana, the minute people knew she was back in her house, if they didn't see her for 2 weeks and didn't hear anything about her, somebody would knock on the door and see if she was okay.
Yeah.
She'd have to at least confront another human being.
Yeah. That's like almost like small town America. I'm not sure that's unique to Louisiana. It really is unique to small town. People know each other's business.
Yeah, in Louisiana, I've never seen a place where on Sunday or Saturday you go around and you not only see guys out fishing, they're there with their wife and their kids. Yeah. You go to a Cajun, nightclub, and it's a restaurant, and there's music there, and there's people dancing, and their kids are there as well. The link between families doesn't break as easily as it does in some other places.
There's no generational split off.
Which can be suffocating for some people, and she's one of them.
How about the mosquitoes? Running into any mosquitoes down there?
Yeah, we toward the end of the day, we always remembered we're shooting in a swamp. That's where mosquitoes breed. And we put on bright lights so they know where to find us.
So they could come in and
say,
hey,
it was pretty serious.
Put me in this film.
We had mosquito netting over the actors, and I'd say action, and somebody'd whip it off. And they were good troopers about it. They acted their scene, and the minute I said cut, there was a lot of, this kind of thing.
Let me take a look. This is a clip from Passion Fish with Mary Murnell, who was here, and Alfie Woodard. Here it is, directed by John Sayles. Where's the music? What's the music from?
That was Jimmy McDonald's group, Lou Garou, which is a New York Zydeco band with a lot of guys from Lafayette. And he's actually the guy who brought us down there originally and introduced us to the people in the Zydeco world and the Cajun world. And we shot at his father's house. And there's a bunch of good music in it, really the kind of state-of-the-art Zydeco people, John Delafosse and the Eunice Playboys, the Balfa brothers, the last of whom just died a couple months ago, who were the first Cajun recording artists. And it's interesting because that music is just now starting to have a wider influence, and you hear it in commercials and all that kind of stuff, but also in rock and roll and some other musics.
You are no longer shooting Springsteen's music videos because Springsteen is not necessarily going to shoot a music video?
Oh no, other people have done them since. That was a great experience.
Did you do which one did you do?
I did Born in the USA, I'm on Fire, and Glory Days, which was the fun part was getting to work with him, and the people around him were all very professional and very nice.
The E Street Band and the rest of them.
Yeah, and getting to cut to great music.
Yeah.
And the tough part was that we were doing a couple of them right when he was getting married the first time, and there were helicopters overhead, and we had radio stations reporting where our caravan was, and and I'm not used to having to make a movie and deal with that whole huge celebrity thing. So
did you select him, or did he select you? In a sense?
It was kind of he was ready to make some videos, and we knew some people in common, and we had used some of his music in Baby It's You, so it was kind of he put out feelers to see if we were interested.
Yeah, and you said, of course.
Yeah, it was great. I'm a short story writer, and besides the rock and roll just being great, he's a really good writer, and that was fun working on somebody who's that good a writer. It can put a pretty big story.
Did you go ahead
in a 3-minute song?
Did you like the last 2 albums?
Yeah, I did. I think that when you look at the whole of anybody's work, there's going to be things that capture the imagination of everybody, and then there's going to, if knowing it from the inside like I do, you work through things. And even as you're doing it, this is going to be more popular, this is not going to be more popular, but this is a story I want to tell.
I want to mention a couple of things before I go. We're almost out of time. The next film is about, it's about Ireland, set in Ireland, and it's about what?
It's about a little girl whose baby brother has been lost at sea, and she hears he might be alive. In fact, he may have been raised by seals.
And what's it called?
It's called The Secret of Ronan Ish, which is basically Seal Island.
Yeah. And it's almost for you a kind of black stallion in some sense?
Yeah, I'd say so. It's just it's a good story, and I hope it's a movie that you can bring your kids to. But if you don't have kids, you'd go anyway.
Yeah. To know you from previous interviews, I know of your politics.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about the Clinton administration so far, and how do you feel about where the country is?
Yeah, I think that the Clinton administration, there are a lot of things that they will do almost immediately that will be good for the country. I think also, though, people have to realize that politics can only do so much for you. Politics and culture, kind of go hand in hand, and the culture has to catch up with the politics. I'd say
Is it that way, or the politics catch up with the culture? Which is it?
They get ahead of each other. So certainly the civil rights movement legally did certain things for African Americans in this country, but the culture didn't necessarily catch up with it everywhere. And also there are some things that government can't control. International and economics,
global recession.
That's a big monster, and you can't necessarily whip it into shape.
What do you think of the influence these days of talk radio and those kinds of things now as playing a part of influence on political issues? I
think that it's anything that gets people out and talking is good.
I do too.
Anything, even if you don't like what they're saying, it's just so much better than people, having to hold it in or not getting any
And
kind
I think
of forum.
the more politicians talk and the more they answer questions regardless of the forum, the better off we all are.
Yeah.
I mean, because you can pick up...
Backroom politics is like the death of cities. It's the death of us all.
Yeah. You choose to live in New Jersey because, why?
Because I like it. I live in Hoboken.
You're still in
nice.
Hoboken?
Yeah, I split my time between
There's
the
no
road.
reason not to like New Jersey,
yeah,
but
Hoboken. I have a place in upstate New York now, but it also, I think it helps not to live in Hollywood in a funny way, in that the stuff that I do on a spectrum is more like everyday people, and in Hollywood, if you're in the movie business, it's tough to not feel like everybody's auditioning for you or you're auditioning for them.
Yeah, it's great to see you again. Passion Fish is John Sayles' new film, and he's off to Ireland soon to start again. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Pleasure
Joe.
to see you. I should mention tomorrow morning's New York Times for Friday, February 5th says that President Clinton has chosen a New York judge, Kimba Wood, as his new Attorney General, suggesting that they're now doing the background check. She is a federal district court judge who was the judge in the Michael Milken case. We'll hear more about that story. She's also the wife of Michael Kramer, who's been on this show, a Time Magazine correspondent many times. Thank you, John. We'll be right back. As we do, we'll introduce you to the Sisters Rosenzweig, Wendy Wasserstein's play, and as soon as we take a break, some of the lead actors from that play will be joining us as the play gets ready to move to Broadway. Back in a moment.